Thanks for being with us here on East Idaho Newsmakers today. The Idaho Governor is with us. Governor Little is here to talk about a few things coming up this year. You gave your State of the State earlier this week. Talked about a bunch of stuff. You announced that the Idaho National Guard, a few troops are going over to Germany.
Yes, and that's a big exercise. This exercise has been planned for quite a while. There'll be about 1,800 Idahoans, and then Montana, Oregon, all that are part of the 116th. They'll be going over there, and this is that's what they do. Is they train and train and train. Hopefully, never to be used, but this will be a great demonstration of the readiness of the United States.
So I want to go through a few of the other things you talked about in the State of the State. You mentioned that Idaho is now the least regulated state in the nation.
It is.
75% of all regulations were done away with in the past year?
No, either simplified or done away with.
Simplified or done away with.
About a third of all the places in the rules where it said shall or will now are either gone or made more permissive. It was long overdue. You know, we started implementing rules in the early 90s, and they just rules on top of rules on top of rules, and then a law would come by that would make some of the rules that didn't apply, or a federal court ruling, and we wanted the rules to say what we wanted the rules wanted to say. And when the legislature left town and all the rules disappeared, we got to pick up the ones that we thought were really necessary for the safety, for the efficiency of the state, put them back in place, and the rest of them are gone.
And you said your first executive order of this year is going to be zero-based regulation. What does that mean?
Well, zero-based budgeting means that everything in the budget, you look at every single item. You don't just take what you spent last year and say, we're going to take last year and add or subtract something. This is in the regulation field, which means every rule that exists, like every 5 years, we'll go through all the rules and say, does it really say what we want it to say? Can we get rid of more rules? So it's just a refreshing process to reduce the friction cost of government.
Let's talk a little bit about the budget. You called it a budget reset when you took office, and what did that involve?
Well, actually, we didn't do the budget reset when I took office. I did the budget reset. We started on it last fall when we saw that the revenue was down significantly, not because the state's not doing well, but because we do what we most often do, is we adopted the federal tax code. When we adopted the federal tax code, our people's taxes went down, and we were about $150, $60, $80 million short. But because we'd been conservative and prudent, but we needed to match up spending with revenue coming in. So I took 1% out of this year, except for public education, and 2% out of next year. But by letting the agencies know, well in advance, they could plan for it.
What is the outlook for 2020? You mentioned Idaho's doing well with growth. A lot of people coming in. Doesn't show any signs of an immediate economic slowdown.
No, not at all.
So what's the budget looking like for this upcoming year?
Well, it's, like I said, we're right-sizing it. As we adjusted to the new way we collect taxes, which is great, it's less taxes. People are paying less taxes. As we adjust to that, we're adjusting spending to match the revenue coming in. Right now, we're ahead of schedule. We're going to be fine.
Talk a little bit about the grocery tax.
Okay.
That's a topic that everybody seems to be talking about. What do you foresee the outlook on that once the legislators start discussing it?
Well, in combination with what we were talking about spending and revenue coming in, and wanting to invest in public schools and continuing to improve education for Idaho students, there's about $35 million in an account that's for tax relief. It's basically what you pay if you buy an item on the internet. That 6% tax, that's $6 on $100 worth of purchases, has been going into an account. And so at the state, I said, let's put that into relieving the pressure on groceries for Idaho citizens.
Meaning that the grocery tax could be done away with?
Well, this pays for about half of it.
Half of it, or cut.
Or you could boost the rebate, the credit that taxpayers get.
And do you feel optimistic about that?
There's a little pushback. When everybody's looking at $35 million for their project, and legitimately, property taxes, income taxes, corporate income taxes, personal property taxes, everybody's looking at that $35 million. I made a commitment on grocery taxes, and that's what I said I wanted to do.
That's what you want to do. Highway and transportation, of course, another big issue, the roads in Idaho. What's your outlook for that for this coming year?
Well, we've got some new money coming in. It's a variety of the fact that people are just traveling more. There's more fuel taxes. There's more registration. There's some other sources that came in. But we got way too many bridges that need to be, and bridges are not, I always call them not sexy. You drive across a bridge one day, it's fine, but what you don't realize is underneath it's showing some wear. We might have to put a load limit on it, or heaven forbid, something could happen to it. We got to spend some money on bridges, and we've got areas of the state where congestion's getting to be a bigger and bigger problem. We got communities where people, are spending triple the amount of time in their cars to get to work or wherever they need to go because of congestion. We got to put some money into that area. There's a study taking place between the cities and the Associated General Contractors to make recommendations on what we need to do. That study's going to be done, I believe, in May, and then I'll sit down with the legislature, we'll go through it and make some proposals going forward.
What are your proposals for education? You mentioned it earlier.
Well, first off, to take the investments that the legislature and I made last year, starting teacher pay, double our investment in literacy so these kids are reading proficiently by the end of the third grade, opportunity scholarships so the kids going to college can get scholarships to help underwrite the cost of college. We've got a lot of good students that have needs that we're not addressing. Those are the three things we did last year that we're putting a little more money into and embedding into our project. Going forward this year, one of the new initiatives I have is increasing pay for the existing teachers, not starting teachers, which is really critical because we've got a lot of border communities around the state where our teachers are going outside of the state because we're just not competitive. And then the other issue is kind of social, emotional, trauma related. These kids that have trauma, to where we can train the teachers to where they know what to do really early on and address the problem these kids have before they manifest themselves into bigger problems later on.
Yeah. Well, there could be a lot of use for that as well as mental health across the board,
Yes,
not just in the schools,
exactly.
but hospitals and clinics.
Yeah.
You met with President Trump a few weeks ago.
Yes, I did.
Tell me a little bit about that.
That was great. He, because of what we did on our rules, what we've been doing on our rules, I got a call from the White House that because the president, he also has a big initiative on rules. I think for every new rule they've implemented, he's gotten rid of 6 or 7. They just yesterday released a new simplification of the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, which impacts everything: construction, roads, agriculture. NEPA affects everything that the federal government touches. And yesterday they released some really bold changes to make that work better. So he wanted to hear from the states that we're doing regulatory reform, what we were doing, how we could help him and he could help us. So that's why I went back and met with him.
What are your views on the impeachment process happening right now involving him?
Of course, obviously, as governor, I have nothing to do with that. I tend to be in full agreement with the Idaho congressional delegation.
Yeah. Do you think President Trump is reelected this year?
Yes.
You do?
The electoral map is the electoral map, and but I just believe that and of course a lot of it depends upon who's the nominee on the other side.
Yeah. Any idea who
Well, I think the nominees that the pundits say have the best chance. I think even heightens the president's chance of getting reelected. Yeah. I just don't see in Idaho. Particularly 4 or 5 of the leading candidates, I don't see independents or Democrats being very excited about him.
Let me ask you a little bit about Iran, knowing that when this airs, the situation could have changed. This will go up on Sunday, and today's what, Wednesday. Your thoughts about what's happened over the past 24, 48 hours in Iran?
Well, my new job as governor, I have responsibility over the Idaho National Guard, both the Air Guard and the Army Guard. And so anything that might threaten hostility, whether it's, off of our shores or on our shores, I'm concerned about, because the safety responsibility. I believe that the president has drawn a line that Americans and other countries need to back up. The administration of the country of Iran are hostile to everything that we have in Western culture. It's even hostile to the things that are in the Mideast culture. It's a very radical agenda, and it's dangerous to the world. And I know the world looks to America to make sure that they don't, A, get weapons of mass destruction, or B, continue to foster terrorism around the world. So, I hope and pray that there's a peaceful resolution, and that we basically that this turmoil has taken place the last few days goes down, and particularly the Iranian people see the folly of their current leadership. The Iranians are a pretty educated group. They're not, there's a lot of educated people, but there's a little group of them that control the government that are a real problem.
Yeah. Back here at home, one of the big pushes from a lot of people is to make medical marijuana legal in Idaho. Some of the surrounding states have already done that. What are your views on that?
My position on medical marijuana, and we actually have medical marijuana in Idaho. We've got 3 different compounds that are legal in Idaho. We know what they are. We know what the quality is. The FDA's approved them. One of them's for these kids that are having problems with epilepsy. The other 2, I think, are both for chemotherapy patients. So there are marijuana derivatives that we know what the quality of them are. And I don't have any kind of an issue with that. What I don't want is medical marijuana to be camouflaged for recreational marijuana. Our neighboring states have a huge surplus of both high-grade and low-grade recreational marijuana, and they're looking for a place to sell it, and I just can't go there.
So you're in favor of medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana?
If it's medical marijuana that's FDA approved, we know what's in it. We
Sure.
know what it's not somebody taking recreational marijuana and saying, oh, I'm not feeling very good today. I've got a little distress in my life. That's the problem. Most of the states, now Utah's different, most of the states that have implemented medical marijuana, that's been the problem. It was really recreational marijuana camouflaged as medical marijuana.
Yeah, Utah kind of went back and forth to come up with their option. Yeah. Let me ask you an issue here in eastern Idaho that's been big over the past few months, and really it affects people statewide, is medical debt collection. Melaleuca CEO Frank VanderSloot announced this $1 million fund to fight what he deems are aggressive debt collection practices, and he's encouraging some legislation to be passed to kind of regulate that or restrict it. What are your thoughts about that?
I haven't seen the legislation. I've talked to Frank about it. I've always been in the position to where if there's unfair practices, any kind of practices, where people legitimately are doing the right thing, and then it's kind of the cascading legal process to where legal fees on top of legal fees and notification isn't going, and people trying to do the right thing get over penalized. I've always had an issue with that. Whether it's college. There's a big article in the Wall Street Journal, I think yesterday, about a lot of these college debts and people that are basically doing collection on loans, yeah. and some of these shysters that are selling loans on the internet or on TV that where there's not, where, you know, the money in it is suing people for not making the payment. I just am not, I just think it's a bad thing, but we also need to be careful about the heavy hand of government getting involved in it. But if there's a true injustice, we need to address it.
Been in office a little over a year now. Well, no, a year.
Yes.
A year.
Today, I think.
A year today. Congratulations. What's the main thing you've learned?
Well, the diversity of Idaho and the incredible things that are going on in Idaho. People are concerned about growth. I remember when I first started as lieutenant governor, we had 100,000 people out of work, and our kids were fleeing the state. And you know, everybody I talked to, you know, they might have been getting by, their business might have been okay, but the fact that their kids couldn't stay here, that's my number one issue, is how do we create an atmosphere to where our kids can stay here. And so we got to have good and better jobs. We got to have less governmental regulatory friction. We got to have a tax system that's fair, simple, predictable, and competitive. We've got to have a good education system. And I don't have very many people argue with me about that. And people all want to put their shoulder to the wheel and help local government and state government get that done, and I couldn't be more excited.
What's the worst part of the job?
The safety of my whether it's state police, anybody in the state of Idaho, the responsibility I have to make sure that we're doing the right thing, that the people that are deployed in the National Guard are safe, you know, everybody that's under the umbrella of the state is safe. I know one of the issues that I talked about quite a bit in the state of the state was opioid addiction. We've got quite a few things going there. That's something we need to continue to work on. The substance abuse problems we have in Idaho. But everything, the trajectory of everything's going the right way. We just need a little time to get there.
Do you have a highlight of the past year? A favorite moment or favorite thing? Besides Garth Brooks?
Well, yes. Well, I think the fact that when the legislature left town from a regulatory standpoint, and we got to clean the regulations, and the fact that my doubling of literacy money, that's going into the classrooms, and we're seeing classrooms where there's a huge advancement of literacy to where the warm hand of those teachers in those classrooms, along with the resources we're giving them, that those kids that might have had a tough row to hoe their entire lifetime are going to be reading proficiently by the end of the third grade, and they've got a brighter future. That always makes me happy.
Well, thank you very much, Governor Brad Little. We wish you luck over this next year and the legislators as they go back to work, and appreciate you coming in and talking with us. Thank you for watching. Have a good week.